On the 5th of July, the Enforcement Directorate of India, the ED, launched a crackdown against Vivo. Now, Vivo is a multinational Chinese company. It develops smartphones and softwares. The charges against Vivo were stinging. It was accused of channeling money out of India. Why? So that it could show losses and avoid paying taxes. Do you know how much money it is supposed to have laundered? Approximately 624 billion rupees, that's equal to $7.9 billion. This is almost half of Vivo's total sales revenue in India. What's the total? About 1.25 trillion rupees since 2014. That's what Vivo has earned in India. Investigators say Vivo set up a unit in the hillside city of Shimla. The unit had 3 Chinese directors. They used forged IDs and fake addresses to set up a maze of 22 shady companies. This is all according to investigators. These companies transferred money to China, and Vivo is said to have escaped paying tax in India. The revelations are striking for a company as big as Vivo. It has 15% market share in India. What does the story tell you? If a company so prominent can reportedly indulge in such activities, where does it leave other Chinese firms? What is India doing to investigate them? What does this increased scrutiny mean? Is this part of India's pushback against China? Hello and welcome to Gravitas Plus. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. India, we know, is decoupling from China, and it's happening on many fronts. This year, a host of Chinese companies have come under the lens. Look at the case of Xiaomi, the second largest smartphone maker in the world. In April this year, the Enforcement Directorate, or ED, carried out a probe. It found Xiaomi violating India's foreign exchange law. It accused the company of transferring profits to foreign entities. On paper, this money was in exchange for services, but in practice, investigators found that there was no service done. Xiaomi was just siphoning off money, they said. How much money? More than 5,500 crore rupees. This was done over a period of 7 years. Where do you think the money went? To China, say investigators. Then we have Oppo, another Chinese electronic brand. Its tagline is "Aim for Perfection." It's been accused of aiming for tax evasion. Last week, Oppo India's offices were raided. The homes of its key employees were searched. Some documents were found. They showed how Oppo was illegally importing items to India. How was it doing this? Through willful misdeclaration in the description of items. In simpler words, they were packing one thing and describing it as something else. That's the charge against them. This helped Oppo evade customs duty and wrongfully avail exemptions. Do you know the scale of this alleged fraud? Close to 4,000 crore rupees. The case of Huawei is equally intriguing. In February this year, the company was found to have manipulated its account books, again to reduce taxable income in India. It doesn't end there. Even OnePlus, the most sought-after brand in India after Apple, is allegedly involved in the same kind of tricks. In April this year, its officials were summoned for suspected forex violations. The probe is still on. So we have Vivo, Xiaomi, Oppo, Huawei, OnePlus, all Chinese brands accused of taking India's economy for a ride. Do you know the cumulative market share of these companies? Almost 65%. 65% of phones in the Indian market are Chinese. Xiaomi accounts for 23% of the market share, Vivo 15%, Realme 17%, and Oppo 9%. It wasn't always like this. This has happened largely in the last 7 years. In 2015, Indian phones held 68% of the market share in terms of shipments. Chinese brands held just 32%. Today, Indian brands have fallen to 1%. The Chinese have risen to 65%. This is a 99% jump in 7 years. What does this tell you? Chinese companies have wiped out Indian brands, virtually obliterated them from the market. How did they do this? First, the Chinese localized their production. They shifted their units from China to India. Today, nearly all Chinese phones sold in India are also made in India. Samsung and Apple may run out of stock. Chinese brands rarely do. The second reason is discounting. Chinese brands play the volume game. They sell devices for a smaller profit margin. So their phones are cheap and they sell in big numbers. Now look at their finances. In 2020, Vivo made losses of 349 crore rupees. That's what they said, 349 crores, but its revenues went up by 45%. Oppo hit losses of 2,000 crores, but its revenues were up 78%. Why do they suffer these losses? in the hope of long-term gains and capturing the market with wider consumer base. In fact, that's the third factor, market penetration. Chinese brands have their ears and feet on the ground. The CEOs of their brands in India are mostly Indians. They advertise their products to gel with the Indian psyche, and this has helped them penetrate the Indian hinterland. They won over consumers in smaller towns and cities. So to put it simply, Chinese brands have embedded themselves deeply in India, positioned themselves firmly in the Indian market. This helps them withstand any sort of challenges or changes. Look at the trends. Despite border disputes, political tensions, government scrutiny, even the Wuhan virus, the Chinese continue to make profits in India. 4 out of the top 5 smartphone brands in India are still Chinese, and they continue to grow. This year, Xiaomi has registered a growth of 7%. Realme has grown by 20%, Oppo by 22%. This is despite India turning on the heat. And why just smartphone brands? Today, China is entrenched in almost every Indian sector. Look at this report. Chinese investments in Indian startups run into $6 billion. In 2020, Chinese firms had significant stakes in Zomato, Big Basket, Snapdeal, Swiggy, Ola, Oyo Rooms, Byju's, Dream11, Policy Bazaar, Quikr, Rivigo, Rapido and Practo. Some of these investments were cut off post-2020. Most still haven't. India is still working on this to safeguard the Indian market from Chinese infiltration and takeovers. In April 2020, India came up with a new rule. This was for countries which share a land border with India. Investments from these countries would need prior approval. The aim was to curb opportunistic takeovers from China. And since then, India received 347 foreign direct investment proposals, mostly from China. Only 66 were approved. This was in 2020. This year, 2022, India has received 382 FDI proposals from China. As of June 29th, only 80 were cleared. The heightened scrutiny has upset Chinese companies, like the Great Wall Motors, one of China's biggest automobile manufacturers. This month, it abandoned a $1 billion project in Pune. This is another Chinese auto company. It shut down its India office last year. The reason was the same, India's rejection of Chinese FDI proposals. Now let's talk about trade. In 2020, 15 Asian countries signed the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP. It's basically a free trade agreement. It cuts taxes on trade between Asian countries. The problem is, it is dominated by China. It benefits China. The fear is that Chinese products will flood Asian markets more than they already do. So India did not sign it. India was the only major Asian country that did not get on board. Some economists criticized this move. They said the pact would bring cheaper goods into the Indian market, but the government chose to safeguard the interests of local industries, the government of India. In the pharmaceutical sector, India depended heavily on China. In the early days of the pandemic, India was importing 99% of what's called active pharmaceutical ingredients, or APIs. Now, APIs are basically substances that make medicines effective. India was importing 99% of them. 70% of these imports were coming from China. India decided to end this trend. As of March 2022, domestic manufacturing of 35 critical APIs was underway. This is a clear effort to reduce import dependence on China. Same with the telecom sector. May 2021, India approved 5G trials. A host of participants were named. China's Huawei and ZTE were not. And the reason is national security concerns. And now India is tightening the noose on smartphone brands, ordering them to cough up billions in tax imports, seizing their assets for funds channeled outside India. The message is quite clear. India will no longer give the Chinese a free pass, no longer let them control the Indian market. And this effort is not going to be easy. China still remains one of India's largest trading partners. Bilateral trade rose to a record high of $115 billion this year. China also remains the largest source of India's imports. It accounts for 15.4% of total imports. What about India's exports to China? Only 5% of India's exports are going to the mainland. This imbalance shows why India must push back and how India still has a long way to go.